My name is David Reichard. I'm a professor of history and legal studies at California State University, Monterey Bay. I teach courses in history, legal studies, politics, various different issues. And my research has been focusing recently on the history of early LGBT student organizing in California on college campuses. The sort of movement for students to organize on college campuses started in the United States in the mid-1960s, first at Columbia University, and then it mushroomed out around the country. The very first groups organized primarily undergraduate and graduate students. They sort of focused on trying to create spaces on campus. They were influenced very much by the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, and other things that were happening in the mid-1960s, some of the social movements of the period. And they sort of began to decide, well, we want to claim some space for ourselves as LGBT folks. But beginning in the 60s, they began to sort of want to claim public space. And they did this in various different ways. The most common way was that they formed student organizations on these campuses. And those student organizations became the sort of hub, what I call in my research, organizing home, the organizing home from which they mushroomed out around the campus and doing different programs and other activities. And I always think about it as it changes through the 70s. So it's the late 60s and 1970s that became the period where they really coalesced. So some of the earliest groups were at San Jose State, San Diego State in 1969, and Sacramento State in December of 1969. And then it quickly spread around a lot of campuses in California after that. There's an early few groups in the mid-60s, and then most of them after 1969 nationally too. And that seems to be a thread that runs through a lot of those, everything from the Arraignment Intervention Project that gay law students in Southern California were involved in. I think you were involved in that, in collaboration with the Gay Community Center there. But also in Northern California, sort of thinking about the brief banks that the Hastings students created that they put in the library so that anyone that was kind of interested in how do I model petitions, what kind of research is out there on these issues, that they would make it public for other lawyers to use. And of course, in feminist organizing, a lot of lesbian students were involved in custody cases and trying to create similar materials for other lawyers who are working on similar cases. So I think part of the motivation for law students was how do we move the profession in a way that's more friendly to LGBTQ issues. This generation was incredibly resourceful in coming together and creating spaces on campus amidst great resistance. And so they had to develop the fortitude to persist, to use a term that is very common today among activists, around Black Lives Matter, to just persist in this struggle, which is a very long-term struggle. They developed the capacity to do this through actually engaging with their communities. So they might have had some setbacks, but many of them kept going. So they persisted in their work and they kept their eye on the prize. They had a sense of their own role in the wider movement. It's pretty consistent, for example, in the interviews that I did for my project, the work that I've been doing, that they really knew that they were making history, that there was a sense of this is important, what we're doing is important. And part of it was there were so many external threats that they knew that they were pressing some buttons by the work that they were doing. They introduced new concepts to the campus community. They challenged established academic thinking, like professors were doing too, but they were challenging ideas about psychology and history and literature where there were no LGBT folks to be found. They were saying, yes, there are. And they were sort of promoting changes in curriculum policy at the university. They promoted what I call queer creativity, and they, through theater and art and all kinds of other forms of creativity, through poetry readings and film festivals. They were trying to transform the campus into a much more LGBT friendly space where students would feel welcome, because that was really one of the big struggles of the period. So, when they arrived on campus, they thought they were the only ones. And these organizations created that visibility.